Let's then go to the. Let's go to the churning now, and let me solve several of your problems because in the churning it's so easy. I want to know exactly what happened. Can you tell me in that learning process? First place, which churning aid are we talking about?
Okay, well, I took the famous one, the Opus 299, the ninth one.
That's all right. This is good. Okay. Now, how long did it take you to learn?
Oh, I mean, the learning of it was a breeze. I mean, the learning of it is like, the whole process between revving the speed, the tempos up from basic to first goal and first goal to second goal and second goal to third goal was it was just took me a day. I mean, not even
a day.
Well, let's say the
did you do the whole etude?
Oh yeah.
But setting.
The problem is, one of the problems is that it is time consuming to have to go up 10 tempos. It is time consuming, but the notes are not a problem.
Yes, but you see, it really isn't time consuming because of one thing. It might be, you might be able to separate this piece. You see, you might be able to separate, but you get to know how you do it. Now, this etude. You see, you did the whole piece one sitting.
Probably.
What do you mean probably?
Well, it's been a while. Yeah,
So,
I would say yes. I would say yes.
Well, how long did it take you?
Well, let's say 2 days. 2 days to get the from basic tempo to top tempo.
Well, that's much
too long.
Now, for 2 pages, these 2 pages here, at most should take you an hour and 10 minutes. So that would be 2 hours and 5 minutes before pages. So at the most 2 hours and a half, if you did every single tempo. But there's something you did wrong unless you're talking about practicing an hour a day.
Well, maybe I'm overestimating. It's been.
No, you see, now the whole purpose, it's awful difficult really, although once you talk to me about it, and then you do the system, it's a real breeze. I mean, you know exactly what you're doing. But you starting out, looking at the book and trying to do it, there will be a lot of things you don't quite understand. Now, your top tempo was 100.
That was 100, yeah.
Now, what is your basic tempo?
The basic tempo, it's not written there, I don't remember.
Well, it says top tempo 100, second goal 63.
Okay.
That's what you heard.
Then 20 tempos below second goal was my basic tempo.
So what tempo is it?
54, let's say. No, I don't remember.
63. That's why it's so easy. You see, your top tempo is 120. You see, so when you deal with something like this, it's very easy to do. It's 100, 66, 100, and 66. Those are the 2 goals you need. Those are the 3 goals. Basic tempo, top tempo is 100, 66 is your second goal, 100 is your first goal, and 66 is your basic tempo. Did you start out at 66?
I started out 30 tempos below 100, so
okay. Now, remember we said approximately 30 tempos. Actually, it amounts to 28 tempos. Because if you don't go below 60, which in the book I've said, we try not to go below 60 because of the time. They're too long between the ticks. You get uneven, and you get, especially in the slower tempos, there's a mountain of time between each note, So you try to stay above this, and if you count down 110 tempos, that's 66. You see. Now, if you count 66, then 63 and 60, then go back up to 120 for 2 notes per take. You did that? Did you?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay,
these numbers confuse me.
Now, this, you should write as well as have your tape.
I'm looking for my notes here. I don't think
Have you got a pencil? Okay. The reason we did this in the churning etude is that you can put it over here if you want.
Oh, good idea.
Put it right
Right by you.
There's okay. Let's pretend this is the same etude you're doing again. Well, just to give you, because you've done it, you know what you had, problems and so on. Your choice of top tempo was correct, 100. So, you try to work only in these etudes like this. To make it easy for yourself, you try to work only between 60 and 120. Your tempos are only within that range. You could go below 60, but as I told you, it gets too slow. You go above 60, above 120, but it makes it more complicated because then you're going to have different tempi. So if you do if your top tempo is 100, 10 tempos under the top tempo is 66, then if you go down to 60 and go up to 120 and count back, you arrive for your next goal at 100 again, only 2 notes per tick instead of 4 notes per tick. You understand that?
I think so, yeah.
No, you don't.
I'm trying to understand.
Yes, I understand. Your metronome? Did you bring one?
It's in my car.
All right, well, I'll tell you, look, 100 is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That's 100. That's your top tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like that, isn't it? Now, 10 tempos under that is 60, 66. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just approximately 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, to get slower to the second goal, to the first goal, we count back from 66. 66, 63, 60, which is 120 for 2 notes.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see. And count back to 100, which is the next goal. And you only use 2 numbers that way, you see. Use 166.
Oh.
And you don't have to count way back to 52 or 54, count all this, it makes it very, very complicated. You just run between 120 and 60.
I see.
You just run in there. You understand that?
I understand.
So that is why it makes it very easy. So if, say, your tempo was 90, top tempo was 92, 10 tempos under 92 is 60. So then 10 tempos under 60 is 92 again. And your basic tempo then would be 60. So you only use 2 numbers.
Oh, I see. That's really very simple then.
It makes it very simple, and also as we said in there, it's it's not really 30 tempos. It's approximately 30 tempos, because if you use those 2 numbers, then it makes it so much easier. It actually is a little more, but instead of saying 92, 60, and then 84 and 58 or something, you just use those 2 numbers, and it amounts to 28 tempos.
28.
So that's and that over a 30 tempo span. But to get the idea, each one of those goals is approximately 10 tempos apart. That's all. You see, it's very simple. So what you do, you determine first the top tempo. In this case, the top tempo, as you determined, was 100. It was a very good choice. Then you find automatically your basic tempo, which, as I said, we counted back to 66. And then if we go back to 60 and up to 120 and backwards again, it is 100 is first goal, and 66 is basic tempo. So you take 2 bars, as you did, and practice from 66 basic tempo to your first goal. Is that what you did?
Right.
Okay, then what did you do?
And then I did the same thing for the second group and the third group. Then I repeated the 3 sections at the basic tempo.
That's right. Exactly.
Then I continued through the whole piece. And then
Did you? You did the whole piece that way?
right.
Okay.
Your
Now,
glasses are right under the couch.
oh, I see. Now, because you chose a piece of this length, I would have done only 2 pages this way. Exactly as you did, 4 pages, but 2 pages. Then, when I got into the top tempo of this, I would have done the other 2. Because if you take too big a section, and of course with this piece it's so easy, you'll remember it.
Uh-huh.
But supposing the piece is the Schumann toccata, you see, which can be done exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. Then, by the time you get through 4 pages, you've lost the continuity of the first 2. In fact, the more difficult it becomes, there is where you decide to end your practicing at the end of the first day. You see, you might in the Schumann Toccata say, I'm only going to do two pages a day.
So are you saying that, oh, you do 2 pages and then the next day you do the next 2 pages?
No. It all is in relation to how difficult the literature is concerned. As we're using Czerny, you can do 2 pages this same way and then do the next 2 pages the same way. But that's why I usually choose 2-page Czernys. So that you could get the idea and you wouldn't have to learn 4 pages of it, just 2 pages. And that way you know that 2 pages of this Czerny will take you at the most an hour and 5 minutes. To play from basic tempo to the top tempo, 2 bars at a time with the what do you call it? The
metronome.
Coming back.
The review.
Reviews with the reviews.
Okay, so maybe I'm jumping ahead, but this is an important point. I practice a great deal. I mean, let's say I practice 8 hours every day. Okay. Now, I can cover a lot, even if I do 10 tempos, 10 tempos, 10 tempos, a lot of music.
Yes, but you see, there's one thing that you can't do, unfortunately. And this is why, if you learn the system very carefully, you'll know just how much you can do. Everybody's capacity is different. Now, just playing 10 tempos over and doing another 10 tempos and playing another 10 tempos, another 10 tempos, is not going to get you at one sitting to learn the Islamic, because you don't have basically the concentration to sit for 26 hours.
You mentioned that in
or
the book.
Something of that kind, and do it. So you have to determine what your concentration is. So therefore, in learning something, you learn 2 pages at a time, and it's very concentrated work. And you stop there. You don't. When you finish the 4 pages, what did you do after that? But you pushed it on to the next day. Okay. Now in this piece, whatever you do, if you're going to push it on to the next day, you really should attain your goal the first day. Now, whatever the goal is, in this kind of piece, the goal is top tempo. In the Schumann Toccata, the goal might be first goal for 2 pages, and maybe for 4 pages for the first goal. No faster, because you can do it perfectly without any problem. You see. Then the second day, you come back, you review the first goal quickly, maybe 1, 3, 5, 7. Then you up to the first goal again, basic 1, 3, 5, 7. Then start at first goal and go to second goal.
So, and then those are only on the first 2 pages that we're discussing right now, right? What did you mean by first 3, 5, 7? Are those tempos?
Yes, tempos.
Okay,
so in other words, instead of 10 tempos, you're skipping 1.
Okay,
see, you're skipping 1. Now, as I say, you have to. The more difficult it gets. When you cannot attain that top tempo, the first sitting, and if it's complicated, you may not be able to do it. So then you don't try to. You definitely do not even try to. You try to get, if even the second goal is a big reach for you, then only go to first goal the first day. You see. But then learn the notes. Your 10 times, 10 times, 10 times of a few more pages. Because the second day you can come back and rev up to second goal and do the same thing. But you've got then a firm second goal. And in a very complicated piece, such as the Schumann Toccata, I would learn the whole piece through at second goal before I go to top tempo. And by 2 pages at a time. Boom, 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 that way, you see. I'd learn because you have to think this way, because everything you do must be a breeze, and you arrive at your goal without any problem. Did you have any problems? You didn't have any problems here. No, merely because this is sight readable to you. You see, this is sight. But you see, sight reading is something different than we're doing now. This is penetrating. So this is penetrating well. When you look at the page here, you're watching those notes 10 times, 20 times, 28 times. And those notes are becoming fastened perfection-wise in your ear and brain. So therefore, that is why you're doing this method, because when you get to the piano literature, it's very important. This is exact stuff you're learning. And you do it exactly. And it's not sight reading. So that is why it's not always understandable why I give you a churning to do this way, especially if you're a good sight reader, because you could probably sight read it almost that tempo anyway. But you see, that sight reading business is not learning piano. And that's the thing, that what you're doing is really the opposite of what you do when you have to sight read and accompany.
You know, I found that so interesting in your book because you mentioned that very oftentimes a good sight reader has difficulty with memory.
Yes.
And you know, I never made that connection before because
Right.
I did so much sight reading.
Right.
That when
Well, you see, you're doing one thing and you're never allowing yourself to go beyond that point. And you're not practicing it. Memorizing is sheer practice. I mean, if you don't, you can go down here, I imagine you go down on any street corner down here and go in and see a person, a little old lady who's in there, and she'll tell you, she can't read anything, she's too old. Well, she hasn't used her mind. Or a man too, he hasn't used his mind. They just not. I mean, if you didn't walk every day and you sat in front of television all day long, if it would be a very great problem for you to walk to the mailbox. But it's just exactly that. It's just a mental thing, and so that's why you have to. What I'm trying to produce here, learning-wise, is a real accurate way of learning, and memorize it. Because here, if you keep your eyes riveted carefully, those number of times, they're sinking in your mind, and you'll find that, and you notice, if you remember what this one part I said, there is a time along there, when, along those metronome speeds, where you start to memorize. And you really recognize it. Everybody does.
You
say,
begin to
gosh,
look
it's
away.
beginning to come from memory. But usually, you say, oh no, I won't memorize that. But then you should take advantage of that, I think. Not to the point where you start making mistakes, but take little advantage of it, even if it's all right, I'm not going to look at the first two measures of this. You're going through the whole page now. I'm not going to look at the first two measures of this, because, and then I'll look at the rest of it. And just starting that habit is the most incredible thing. Just starting that habit, you'll find yourself constantly looking away from it, trying to memorize. So it's very, very interesting. This is what I want you to. You're going now to learn things from memory, and therefore we must learn them as though we're going to learn it from memory. And even though it may seem to you something that you know already, I'd like you to learn one more of these things.
Fine.
And this one is a very good one because it's technically very much, and it's number 12 here. And just learn that one. Now, you are practicing at 40, aren't you?
Yes.
All right, 40. Here I would, I'm going to put down the top tempo.
All right.
The top tempo, make it 92 instead of 100.
All right.
Top tempo, TT. And what would be for a second goal?
60.
All right, what is first goal?
92.
Haha, good for you. First goal, and basic tempo?
60.
60. All right. Now, you do exactly the same thing. You see, this is only 2 pages long. This piece should take, now I may be slightly incorrect, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. I would say around an hour and 10 minutes to play every tempo up to your top tempo. Right, straight through. And so it's worth an hour and 10 minutes out of your time to
Now,
do this.
that doesn't include the combining of the sections, right?
Well, now, the combining is to be done, you see, is to be done, you must understand my philosophy. This is very important. Ideally, I would like you to sit down and play the piece the first time magnificently, from memory, right?
Right.
But you can't.
Why not?
All right. So you're not sight reading from memory. So therefore, what you must do is the first time you play this piece at basic tempo, 2 bars at a time, is absolutely perfect. Well, unless you accidentally slip off a note, but if you start slipping off notes at that, then basic tempo is probably your top tempo, you see. But you're that way. Now, that is the guideline. Right there is the guideline for the whole thing. The next tempo must be just as good. The next tempo must be just as good. The next one up to first go must be equally good. Now, anywhere along the line, if you can combine 2 of your sections and make it just as good, then use combination. Then combine. Okay. And that is the important philosophy there, because it isn't that I want to constrict you to 2 measures or 1 note for the rest of your life until you get a certain age. It isn't that way. It's just that you are going to play like climbing a ladder. Every rung is absolutely firm. The next rung is firm. The next rung. However, when you get to that point where the rung is wobbling, you don't do it. You stop. That's it. That's it. In other words, if you got to the point in this piece that 84, you couldn't go beyond 84. You don't push 84 because you only got 2 more tempos to do. Just put a knot. Last time those 2 bars went only to 84. Because the miraculous thing is you'll find out that when you do it the next day,
It's easy.
you go right straight up.
I discovered that.
As if you passed it in the desert at 90 miles an hour. So you never do anything. In other words, this practicing is only perfect practicing. The more perfect you get it, the less problems you're going to have later on in getting wound up in memorizing the thing. Because you're really building, as I said there, you're planting a garden in sterile land with no weeds. Not sterile for the seeds, but sterile as far as weeds are concerned. And when they come up, you have the garden. But if you plant it, you can plant it still with all the weeds there and let it come up through the weeds and then try to take out. But that's what people do. And that is where your sight reading, which if you sight read a piece like this, you're constantly cleaning out the weeds for month after month after month after month, and psychologically it's bad. Psychologically it's bad because you're not working at really what you should be, the perfect model that you've presented for yourself. You're working at an imperfect model all the time until you clean it up. So now your sight reading on one hand will come to help you later on when you get to know your system very, very well, because in every piece, including this piece, this is rather difficult. But if the sight reading will come to hand, and I would say that it would be wise to, if you ever do think of skipping tempos, it should be between basic tempo and first go. But I would set the first few tempos pretty firmly. If you do skip a tempo, remember the Marsh rule. What is it?
Perfect accuracy at all times.
The next tempo must be as good as the preceding.
Okay.
All the way up, the ladder, you see. And never practice to get a tempo. It arrives automatically there. You cut it. If it doesn't, then that's all for that time. Go ahead and go through. So now you have, I would, for you just to get used to this system, I wouldn't try to do any skipping of the tempos, even though you can. You probably certainly could. But then you apply this to something else. Those,
Beethoven.
well, you know them. You know them. They're, God, how I get
You don't have a book with piano literature or anything like that? A piano literature?
No, everything's piled up in.
Your office.
No, I have it, but it's piled in boxes.
Why don't you call? We could, because this is important. Maybe I could call the music store here in town and ask them.
I'll remember in a few minutes.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Beethoven.
Bagatelles.
Bagatelles. All right.
Bagatelles. See, I kept wanting to say novelettes. Bagatelles. Now, do the Beethoven bagatelles.
Okay, there's only one.
There's all of them. Do them all.
Okay, but that's only one. That's one group. There aren't different groups. Okay, bagatelle.
And so, and I would do Beethoven bagatelles that the first one I would do that fits nearest to this kind of outline. And there are those. Now, for instance, when you get to lyrical things, you're dividing things up to lyrical things. You keep this in mind. Here, you're having 32 notes in 2 measures, aren't you? Now, if you got to a lyrical passage, say there was a lyrical passage here, you see, and there was a whole note and a half note, quarter note, 16th note, you could literally, instead of, for the next 2 bars, might really be 6 bars. Because it's approximately the same number of notes, but that would be your next section. You understand? In other words, you don't just, supposing you had 2 notes as a 2-bar section, a whole note here, and a whole note the next bar.
Yes.
You wouldn't want to repeat that 10 times, would you? Well, so you go on and make your section comparable to the first 2.
Approximately 32 notes.
No, don't be so accurate as that. Be very relaxed about it. Something you can play very easily without any problem.
Okay.
As easily as you did the other. And also, one other thing I would say in there too is that when, especially in the slower tempos, here at that point you can skip tempos between basic tempo and first go.
We're talking about the lyric pieces now.
The lyrical sections.
All right. Which bring, I don't want to push you on, but I have some other questions about other forms of pieces. For example, the learning of slow pieces.
Yes.
Okay, how would you?
Now, slow pieces, I've told you in there.
Approximately 20 tempos.
No, well, yes. I say 20 tempos. You can say 20 tempos, you can say 18 to 20 tempos, right.
Okay.
Now, what I would do in the slow pieces is just simply this. You divide that up into 2 goals. And again, I wouldn't rivet myself to 2 bars, but I rivet myself to a section that is comparable to 2 bars of like this Czerny stuff, or the Prokofiev Toccata, or the Schumann Toccata, or something of that kind. It might be 4 bars in certain cases. So what I would do then is to play them very accurately, all your times, really 40. Forget the musicality. Look at the notes very carefully. Do them all the way up to you're starting here at second goal, so to speak, and you're going to, you're starting at a first goal, and you're going to second goal. Once you reach your second goal, I would start playing with the pedal, and when you reach the top tempo, you don't play with the metronome. In other words, you're doing it 20 times with the metronome. That is not the case with this type of thing, because you understand what your practicing range is, don't you?
What do you mean?
On this kind of stuff, you know what practicing range is.
I don't know what you mean by range.
Well, you practice this kind of piece, this Czerny piece, which is fast, 28 times and learn it, right?
Right.
How do you practice from there on?
Oh, well, it's between second goal and top tempo.
All the time. That's every day's practicing between second goal and top.
Right.
That's. But in the case of lyrical music, you don't. That's.
You just practice
with
at
the
top.
pedal. With the pedal. That's a piece.
Oh, I see.
That's a piece.
Because, oddly enough, I found it easier to memorize these technical pieces you're using your method than a piece like, let's say, the Liszt Consolation number 3, for example. I found it easier to memorize those technical composition pieces because of using this structure. But I couldn't apply the structure very well to that consolation because, number one, it was so slow in the first place. And I didn't know quite how to, I didn't know if I should read. The sections were so easy to play.
Yes, but what you do is to ram them in your mind during the first 20 tempos. you know, knock them into your head. Bah, da, don't forget the lyrical. Just knock the notes into your head and look very carefully at the rhythm, even though it's very clear. If you use this system in a slow movement of a Beethoven sonata, you'll never come to a teacher with wrong rhythm, because it's there. You're playing 20 times the thing, and anything you don't know, it becomes an insurmountable hurdle. So you have to iron it out. You can't play it 20 times incorrect. I mean, you could, but I found most of the time, you know, most people, most kids, if you give them a Beethoven sonata, they come to the slow movement, they come to you and the rhythm's all terrible. You know, I mean, they haven't looked at the thing carefully because they've just sight read it. And they say, oh, well, they've kept this sight reading thing and they have rhythmic errors. But if you do it with a metronome, you don't have that problem.
Yes.
Because you iron it out. So the lyrical parts are very quick, but the first 20 tempos are very important. The first 10, no pedal. The last 10, with the pedal and lyrically. But you could still play it rather 40 if you want. But after that, play it musically, pedal, and so on.
Great. Boy, this is exciting.
You see? So, and it's all logical.
Yes.
It isn't as though it's something that I say, all right, now, if you do this, here's a pill. If you do that, you'll be a great pianist. It's very logical. Now, so if you do this, and you divide it up, an hour and 10 minutes later, you'll be playing the piece with the metronome at top tempo. Now, how do you get to final tempo?
Well, you don't. I mean, you never practice at final tempo.
Well, you do. Sure you do. Because the final tempo is a moving tempo. A final tempo is not top tempo. Final tempo is a tempo close to your margin. In other words, to as fast as you can play it well. If literally 144 were a tempo you couldn't play, your top tempo probably would be something like 126 or 132. And and you would get up to that tempo. First place, you would get the whole piece here, so you play it as a whole before you start moving from top tempo to final tempo.
Well, you say it in your book, you say that you calculate your final tempo, let's say 152 for the Chopin Etude or something like that. Now, those technical pieces, you never practice at that tempo because when you're under pressure, and I'm that kind of person.
But I tell you what I'm talking about, that's why I say the margin. That is your margin, is what you, between the tempo you practice and the tempo that you can't do it anymore at. For instance, if it goes 152, that's the tempo you don't practice ever. Don't practice underneath that tempo. You can trust your nerves to do it. The nervous system will take care of playing, however much you try to play slowly, your nervous system will take care of playing it faster than you've been practicing it. But still with a margin. If 152 is indeed the perfect playing final tempo of a piece, you can't, if your technique limits you, if you're going to fall down by playing 152, you're going to break apart at 152, you can never play 152 yet, later on. So therefore, your top tempo, final tempo, even in concert, your final tempo should be thought of as more like 138. And you probably shouldn't practice up to 130, probably practice 132. You see. So there's always that margin. And if you have that margin between catastrophe and what way you can play, that margin improves, keeps getting faster. And you can then you'll find that you can push up your top practicing tempo because you have that margin. But that's very important. But the next thing I would do with a piece like this, and this would be a good piece for you to bring in to me next time, this piece, and practice it as an exercise every day. It's good exercise in F major, and it's all pitches, and do your fingers a little good. You remember, all this practicing is 40, understand? Very formal, 40. Once you have got this piece through the first round, both pages, round, which is the first day. That's the first round. The second round, and you haven't, say, combined, or you have combined a little bit. You then, the second day, you're going to have to start combining. Because it must be just as difficult the second day for you as the first day. But you have margin. You understand? You have a margin. When it's difficult the first day to do 2 bars, you're 10 tempos. The next day, it may be just as difficult to do 4 bars, 10 tempo. So that's where you're always pushing ahead, you see. So certainly, maybe by the second day, you could do 2 rounds of the same piece and get it to a point where you're playing 3 or 4 lines at a time. And the third day, the whole piece, you see. You're never trying to push this so that you play the whole thing. You could do it the first day and sit down and really do it. There's no real reason to do it. So I don't think of this, because when you really get the hard pieces, you're not going to do it anyway. Because you're not going to try to do everything the first day, because you want to set that die really firmly. And so in 2 or 3, say 3 days, the third day you're playing this piece from your second goal to your final tempo. Then, all at once, in one piece, you see. So then I would say the next day, practice, all right, now I'm going to up my top tempo by 2 notches. Well, the next day you practice. Instead of starting at 66 to 92, you're going to be starting at 72 to 100. Then the next day, you'll push that up another 2 notches to 104, and so on, maybe even more, playing every notch, but trying not to do too much so that you always have that margin. For instance, if you said, all right, now I'm going to push it up to 120, this is the third day, you might find you're beginning to neglect some things, and that can happen. Play that, that's the thing you don't want to have happen. So this is up to you, and noting how well you are. I think certainly you should be playing this by then probably up to 132, and I wouldn't try to play it any faster. It was 92 to 132. Those 10 tempos every day. I just play them as a real technical exercise. It'll do you a lot of good, this one. But learn it now that you know. Now, are there any other questions?
Okay, well, I can't think of anything with this portion of the learning process, but the next portion I do.
All right.
Now, we're getting into the memorization, okay? You state in your book that the first step is the mass memorization. Mm-hmm. That's fine. All right.
Now that's after you know piece.
Okay. Let's say, you know, I'm one of these pieces that I play pretty well. Exactly, that's what I did do. I mean, I took it and I memorized.
Did you put the estimates in?
What are estimates?
It's in there. Did you put?
The time.
How long it was going to take you? Your estimate.
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't, because.
Okay. Now that is an important psychological thing. What you do, say this piece here that you took. Say, in this case, it might be longer. Let's say this is it.
Uh-huh.
All right. You say, okay, now I want to memorize this from there to here.
Uh-huh.
The first thing you have to be aware of is that you can play from here to there, from the beginning of this to there, at full tempo. Well, without very few wrong notes.
Right.
Okay. Then you're ready to memorize.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, when you memorize, then you say, okay, at one period you say, all right, I'm going to memorize from there to there. And in some cases, I wouldn't take it such a terribly long section, like in the Beethoven Sonata, if you're able to do it. I would say I would take for one day the to the development section, and then the second day through to the return of the main theme, and the third day the rest of it. That just gives you kind of, you could do it faster, but it gives you a good grasp of it, and you're not doing too much. But if this is, say, here to the development section, what you do is say, okay, now I'm going to put 2 squares up at the top. how long do I think it will take me, once I start this, to go from there to here, from memory? One page at a time.
One page at a time.
One
Okay.
page at a time. In other words, playing a page through,
And if you
not perfectly,
right.
but correcting myself if I played some wrong things.
And if you have to look at the music, you have to start at the top of the page, right?
Yes, back here.
What? Okay.
Now,
what?
yes, but then when you get through here, then if you've been able to do it just once, from there, then start on the second page.
Uh-huh.
Do the same thing there. Then when you just once, do that, and then to here. And then when you get there, you look at the clock, and in the second square, you put the actual time. Let's see.
Okay, my problem has been, at least recently, with students, that they don't practice enough to do this sort of thing. Like if I say, okay, I did this with some of my students, and I said, okay, I want you to estimate the time it will take you to learn this journey into one of the first ones. And they would say something like 2 weeks. But then they don't practice enough to really do anything.
No, but you see, you're not talking that way. You see, I'm talking about minutes.
Right.
I'm talking about days, minutes. From here to here, you would say, all right, it'll take me, play that now that I'm going to memorize it, mass memorize it. It'd take me, all right, 32 minutes. We put 32 minutes up here.
Oh.
What happens is, it's at one sitting, it has to be done. It has to be done at one sitting.
I see.
That's the important thing, one sitting. Not days. No, you run into that very problem you're talking about if you're talking about it. This is one sitting you're memorizing, mass memorizing. The section, or whatever you decide. Now, I wouldn't memorize the art of the fugue at one sitting, but you certainly can memorize it in bulks of 4 or 6 pages. And if you give yourself 6 pages, or a good little dose, so that they'll come up with, well, 45 minutes, or it'll take me 2 hours. Or they always say this. And then you sit there, and they do it. Can't be interrupted. Tell them they cannot be interrupted, because that's going to affect everything. And then they look at their clock. It's always less. It's always not a little less, very much less. And they begin to say, my God, I've got a better memory than I thought I did. And this is the key to that, mass memorizing. Because they are literally, even though it isn't perfect, they're not looking at the notes, and they're playing it without the notes. Even if it's 1 page at a time, they're doing it. And this is often a very remarkable thing to a person, because they, gee, gosh, every time I do it, I'm overestimating. So when you do it with your students, this must be done just at one sitting. Now, the second stage of mass memorizing can be as a kind of reinforcement of the first stage. You can do the same thing. You can make an estimate. Well, yesterday I did it, instead of 32 minutes, it took me 16 minutes to do it. So I'll say today it probably take me 12. 9 times out of 10 it takes 3. And it's the dramatic change. Once they really start at it, they can't really, they begin to laugh about it. Oh my God, look at this. And from there on, then the key to this is, if it's fast stuff like this, you can put that memorizing bit in together. Now remember, I should first say, remember house cleaning after this.
Yes, okay, now that's the second.
Yes. In other words, you didn't understand the first one. That's why the house cleaning didn't make so much sense to you. The house cleaning is cleaning up all those wrong notes you've been playing there, and you do it with the notes.
With the notes, with the tempos and everything. Okay, I think I understand that. What I don't understand is the next step, the odd even. Now, how do you determine those sections?
Okay, now the first thing you do there, just as exactly the same place as when you're able to read the piece through perfectly, relatively, very well, perfectly, with the music from beginning to end at full tempo, you're ready then to memorize. The same thing is true that when you're able to play the piece through from memory, just as well as you played it through before with the notes, to start memorizing, is the time to do sectional practicing. That's the key to it. In other words, you've got to still be able to do it beginning to end, not for one day, not by fluke, but play it pretty well, you see, with your practicing and so on. Then day, all right, now it's sectional practicing. How do you determine the sections? You try to use exactly the same sections you used when you first learned it. That's where those sections are coming in handy. See, you don't choose new sections now.
So it's 2 measures, or what? How many ever?
2 measures, 2 measures, or 4 measures. If it's a very important piece, it's like with orchestra, I would do 2 measures. I do the same 2 measures I learned it with. But you take, the best thing to do is not try to do the whole piece in one thing, because if you do, your mind is going to be confused. Yeah. What you do is something like 4 pages, 4 pages, a page at a time again. So do the first page and just play a little bit of the first section, a little bit of the second section, a little bit of the third, and then if you don't know any more than that, you start again, a little bit first, a little bit second, a little bit third, try a little bit of the fourth, all right? But you don't know what the 5th one is, all right? Look at the 5th one. 5th one's that, right? And go back, 1, 2, just quickly, 3, 4, 5, and then learn. In other words, learn the beginning of all those 6 sections, you see, and get that for the first day. Just the beginning.
Just the beginnings of the sections.
Don't go into jumping around first day. Just get the beginnings of the sections so you remember. And if you've learned them that way, it won't be difficult.
See, what I did is I took a piece of manuscript paper, and because I couldn't, in the first place, I thought that I had to choose different sections because like this Czerny etude, for example, just doing those 2 measures, I found, too small. So I took larger pieces, but then I found I couldn't remember what came next,
But you see, if you've learned it that way, remember all those times you've been playing it? 10, 10, 10, 10, it comes back to you.
So don't choose new sections, just continue.
Choose the same old sections, that's why you learned it that way. This is a logical process. It isn't like when we build a house, up at the very top there, we got to split the bricks in half. You lay the same bricks. Okay. They're laid exactly this way. And you keep the same thing going. You're using all the tools you used in the first place. You don't have to learn something new way up there. Now, it may be that here and there you want to make a slight shift. But 9 times out of 10 you're using the same holes. Even if the piece is if for some reason you didn't want to learn 2-bar sections, then use your 4 bars. But it becomes very, very easy. The only thing is you've got to review it back in your mind. And so that first day in learning the sections, I learned the beginning of the sections so that you get accustomed to how they fall. And when you know the beginnings of sections, just a page at a time, get that. And you don't do it with this with metronome. You just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, jump fast, and then get it somewhat foggy in your mind. Then do the 2nd page, the 3rd page, the 4th page. No bigger than a section like that for that day's practice. The following day, you come back and you rivet that into your mind. Maybe you don't start until the 3rd day. Maybe the 3rd day you start jumping, playing the odds and evens. But once you start odds and evens, you never go back to the beginning of the sections anymore, because that's where you want to end it up, is the odds and the evens. And so you play the first section all the way through to the first note of the 2nd section. From memory, jump to the 3rd section, go to the beginning of the 4th section. Jump then to the next section and through until you have a small page like that.
But this is only 1 page at a time, right? That we're only dealing 1 page at a time.
At this point, right. When you've done it well that way, it'll be time enough to do 2 pages at a time. And very frankly, even after you get to know a piece very well and play it in concerts, I wouldn't do much more than 4 pages at a time that way, because it stays much more crystallized than if you're wandering through a whole long piece this way. And I would keep it in the sections that you can negotiate quickly, and smaller sections the better. So then what you do this now, once you really accomplish this odds and evens by the page, so you can do first one, yes, the third one, the fifth one, like this, and then go back and do 2, 4, 6, 8. Then once you can do that, then you do that only, you try to put it in your metronome practicing, or you do it only once a day, and you counteract it by playing straight through, straight through, straight through, straight through. But you do it as one element of your practicing there.
Now, I found that the hands apart practicing is really quite easy. You know,
How was that?
the hands separate memorization of the hands.
Yeah, but now that can't come at the same time you're doing the sectional part. Don't try to do that. You have to get one out of the way and learn properly before you start the hands apart.
Oh, see, what I
If
did.
you try to do it all at once, you're, God,
That's what I did.
You'll be mind-boggling. You see, you can, if you read the beginning of my book about the irreducible minimum, now that irreducible minimum philosophy, you may say to yourself, you may think you're saying to yourself, I'm a moron, I'm a moron, I'm a moron, because I'm doing things the irreducible minimum. But that's the way to learn. Don't do it the easiest for yourself.
Oh.
Don't make it difficult. Get it this done, then when that's done, then go to hands apart.
All right.
And the hands apart may not come for a week or a week and a half later. And when then you do it, then you can do it hands apart. Now the hands apart stuff is it's some music. I found some music goes better, actually, but that's after I know the business very, very well. I find that ahead of time I can say, well, to me, I won't do this thing in section, this part of sections, because hands apart will do the trick for me, you see. And sometimes that happens, especially in lyrical type things, where you still break it down into sections, but the hands apart sometimes, and you mind you realize that if you didn't have to do any of this at all, and you played marvelously perfect, I wouldn't have you do any of it. You know, I mean,
No, I'm doing it all.
Yes, but I say if you do it all, it's because you have to do it all. Don't think that you got to do it all. I think you do have to do it all because you've been so much in the company business.
Oh, not only that, I've had terrible experiences, so I really, you know.
Well, this will be marvelous, but you just got to be very logical, and it's every one of these things have to be easy. And you've got to say to yourself, I don't have to conquer Rome today. Next week I'll be practicing. I want to leave something for next week. And I don't want to crowd my mind too much this week. Today I want to do this, and I want to accomplish that. It's going to be an easy goal to accomplish, but I want to accomplish it. You do it. Boy, you go to sleep feeling wonderful. Then you say, all right, now what am I going to do next day? I'm going to do that. You do that. And so learning sections in a piece, I'd rivet in a week minimum before I started hands apart.
And then deep freeze, of course, I found that quite, I mean, taking these pieces at such a slow tempo was very tricky.
What?
The slowing down to, the playing at an extremely slow speed.
Going the opposite
I think you
way.
call it deep freeze memorization.
Deep freezing, yeah, deep freeze. That is very helpful too. But I tell you what I would do. Basically, what will help you is to always have a way of practicing, which is the standard way you practice everything of a technical nature, and that's from second goal to final tempo. Now, after you do this, and always getting up in the morning, you do your 10 tempos, and then you're memorizing, and so on and so forth. Then, as an extra business, you might say, all right, now, I mean, it's really going. I'm talking sort of the, they say, all right, I'm going to try just the opposite today. I'm going to start my top tempo and go backwards as slow as I can. Then I'm going to, if I go back to this tempo, Next day I'm going to start here and try to push it even slower. Now there will be a point where you lose continuity.
Yeah.
Just as when you practice fast, don't practice that. Just that's the bottom tempo. That's it. Next day you go back maybe a tempo more. But and one other thing is you don't want to get it so slow that there's no continuity. So, but you want to keep the concentration going so that you can continue to the next parts and not just have a note and walk around the block and play another note, walk around the block and play another note. You see, because that hasn't got anything to do with playing, performing. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I was going to write in the book. Learning these things is like coming to the top of a piano, a bare piano, and there are a lot of blocks there, alphabet blocks, all over there, higgledy-piggledy. And you are going to put them together in the order with the names, sentences, and so on. And it's the order that you put them in that's very, very, that's what you're doing. It isn't the fact that somebody has never practiced in their life going backwards with a metronome. Somebody has. Now everybody has practiced, a lot of people have practiced sections, but not in this order that I'm giving you. This order is logical, and I'm very convinced of it. And if you do it, you're spending the maximum amount of time to accomplish what you have to accomplish, but not spending too much, or spending too little. So we're just arriving right in the middle of the framework, and that's why I think it's so it'd be wonderful if you can get this going. So, what I suggest, what did you practice in sectionals, Roxy?
I practiced, well, I didn't do it very well because I really didn't understand.
No, but just tell me the things.
Well, I practiced the Prokofiev, I practiced that, I practiced the...
Did you learn the Prokofiev recently?
Uh-huh.
How recently?
I started it... Basically, I would say that I learned it. I was familiar with it a little bit, but basically I learned it between the time I saw you last.
Well, did you do these things that I suggested? Like, did you wait before you sectioned it, or did you learn it so you could play it through many times before you started to memorize it?
Yes.
Mass memorize it.
Yes, I did that.
Then you mass memorized it.
Right.
Then when you could play it through from memory, from beginning to end, then did you wait that long to do the sections?
Right, but I still had difficulty in I got better at it. I could begin to go...
Oh, yes, you can do it. You can do it. I'm just trying to think of the easiest way to do it. Were you doing other things, too? Mm-hmm. Were you?
Oh, yeah.
The same way?
In terms of music, I was doing everything in this way.
This way. Well, you see, that's no good. Because what you do over here is going to ruin what you did over here. And it's going to get all foggy.
Well, that's a point that I think that I really didn't understand, that you have to take one step at a time. See,
One step at a time.
I was under the impression, let's say you had, okay, let's say you have an enormous piece of great length, okay? For example, let's just take the first movement of the Tchaikovsky concerto, and you are under pressure to memorize this, or to have it, to be able to play it. The mistake that I was making is that I was trying to do everything. I was taking 10 tempos, which was taking a long time to get through all of that material. So I made the sections larger, and I was working on larger sections.
But you see, when you get it up to when you're practicing it 10 tempos and so on, and you've done this memorizing thing, the ideal thing is to make the memorizing thing just one of those tempos in sections. When you get it to that point, you want to do this memorizing things like, if you're practicing from 84 to 120, maybe you do it at 100 one time. It's in sections. And then the rest of the time, straight through, straight through, straight through, straight through. That's after you know it.
After you know it.
You don't do it in one time, because you don't want to play it in public in sections, but you want to know it if you need it. So the constant, and this is not the kind of method to give a composition that you have to learn under pressure. I would say that you have to know yourself pretty well by using this, as to know how much pressure you can stand. Because some people, you know, can play this thing over one time and practice it from memory. And so those people, I'm not going to tell them they have to play it 95 times and play it in sections and so on and so forth if they know it solidly one time. So this is not necessarily for that kind of person. But technically, the person would gain a grade if they did it so many times from slow to fast.
Yes.
Technically. But on the other hand, they might be able to play it, doing it a couple of times a day. There are people who would play it pretty well, and therefore they could literally learn a concerto like the Tchaikovsky First Move in several days, just because they have that facility, and their problems lie somewhere else. You see, this is to help you gain confidence. You see, confidence is half of the battle in memory. So that I've had people work this system out and develop tremendous confidence. I've had them to become overconfident. I've had people who really had tremendous problems work this way and play so well that they think they never have to do it again, and then fall in the same trap. And so you have to be confident. It's going to give you more confidence, but you have to know how much real confidence that is.
Yeah.
So and I've had students right here. I sat there and people played and fell all over themselves, and I said, "Have you done it in sections yet?" "Oh no, Mr. Marsh, I did that last composition. I didn't. Now I don't need to do it anymore." I said, "Don't you? Don't you know? It's so you have to really know how much, and how much you have to do, and also if you really are the kind of pianist to really play things magnificently, the more you know the piece, the better you are. And nothing is going to, I don't care if they do learn a thing in 2 days. They don't know it. They might have a facility to get through it without anything happening, but they don't really know the piece. And what happens, they may have a kind of a natural gloss that they can put on the piece and make it sound good, generally good. But it won't be a great performance because nobody can play a great performance in 2 days learning something. And finally, is when you play the concert, you don't give a lecture recital on how many days it took you to play it, do you? I mean, a person might have been 10 years at it, or it might have been a year, and it might have been 3 days, or, well, you'd pretty well know if it's 3 days. But so what we're thinking of here is just sheer logic. You need this. I think you need this system. And do everything like you're building a giant skyscraper, but not building Rome in a day. Take your time to do it. Go through the pieces and do one piece at a time. When it's firm, when it's firmly in sections, then you only play the sections once a day.
Are you saying that I should only be practicing one piece at a time, or are you just saying that, I mean...
you're going to be practicing, I would probably start out with, if you're going to do sections, if you're going to learn sections of the piece, I would do one piece.
I see what you mean. But you're not saying that...
I wouldn't do all the pieces, learn all the pieces in sections.
Oh,
no.
I see.
That's too complicated. But then when you got a handle on that, then you can add more to it.
Yes.
But the handle is very simple, because once you can put that sectional practice in with your metronome practice, it takes you barely that much longer if you're doing your metronome 10 times or so. It's a little bit longer to go one time of those 10 times odds and evens, you know. So then you have plenty of time to do some other things. So it's a building process. You build out like that, and you keep building out. And then you put it away for your practicing, and And to give yourself a little extra time to do this for other pieces, it's possible you might limit some of your 10 times of practicing. But you'd always go from slow to fast. Second go to top tempo. You might do it 5 times, skipping a tempo. That'll give you twice as much time to work maybe a sections in this piece, you see, and so on. So you gotta plan it very, very carefully.
So let's say you're able to play the piece. I mean, you've done everything. I mean, a technical piece or whatever, and you want to add, for example, pedaling and dynamics. Do you?
What do you mean with add?
Well, I mean, let's say you learned the notes. Okay, you're playing everything forte. Then you have to begin to add dynamics, for example.
Well, let's say this, that if you can play the piece through, there are other values here. For instance, I was even going to say here, in that etude, in that Czerny I told you, I would, from basic tempo to first goal, I would play it accenting every quarter note. But very truthfully, the final accent comes twice a bar. So from first goal on to top tempo, I would go right into the final musical accent, which is twice a bar. So you're really accomplishing a musical thing there. But if you play it every note solidly, 40, 10 times like that, you're not accomplishing. That is not the correct design you want. You want it in the final pulsation, which would be in 8 notes at a time, you see.
Okay.
So then, when you get through your practicing, then you can leave a space of time to play it in full tempo with the pedal and decide what you want. But you definitely, after you've done your daily dozens, so to speak.
I see. So, okay, you've done sort of your technical work, and then that is, I mean, you can then begin, after you've done that sort of
Then you do what you want.
work, then
Right.
you can do what you
You
want.
can do what you want. Then you can play it and try to get it more of this, and then the next day it'll go better, and so on. You leave it time to play it, too, very definitely.
Okay.
Very definitely. But I would build out, if you're going to be practicing 8 hours a day,
Well, I try.
I'll tell you something about this kind of practicing. This kind of practicing will, if you do it right, will be equal to your 8 hours a day in 3 to 4 hours. Because it isn't the time. Usually 8 hours a day, I found that 8 hours a day is the only time I've ever used 8 hours a day is I'm learning something new. I'm really learning something very complicated. And so that's learning 2 hours at a time, like the third Rachmaninoff or something like that. Then, and going through it, and really pushing, that will take 8 hours a day, something of that kind. But then I would put all my time on something like that. But I don't practice 8 hours a day, because unless you have you have 5 programs going, and you don't need it. Not with the literature you're doing. You can practice a good 4 hours a day and get one piece organized, so you know how much that time is going to take you to do your 10 times through, and your sectional practicing. Then put another piece in that same category, and then these 2 pieces are taking so much of your practicing. Take another piece, and go through the whole piece until you're practicing the whole program that way, and then it will be it could be 5 hours a day. That way.
I feel perfectly, I mean, I enjoy practicing 6. 8 can be a little bit much, but 6 hours I can do in a breeze.
Well, I know, but you see, it depends upon, this kind of practicing is so concentrated that I wouldn't over-concentrate, because it'll tear down what you've done. Now, you could play some hours of just playing some of the technical things that you've been doing in full tempo and trying to get it musical and so on and so forth, or trying to play something through from memory from the beginning to end. This is all right. That is playing to me. That's playing. That isn't this real nitty-gritty practicing.
Okay.
Because this is cutting the fat off of all your practicing. This is concentrated stuff. And I've done it here. I think maybe I told you that one time I was practicing the second sonata for Rachmaninoff, I tell you that my son, he was attending the university here, and in the morning he got up. He had to be down there at 8 o'clock. So about 7:30, I was already practicing. I said goodbye to him, and then a few minutes later he came back, and I said, "What are you doing back so early?" I mean, not back at all. I mean, what are you doing? I thought you had to class at 8. He said it's 5. Yeah. And so I practiced the whole day without just in total.
Yeah,
blindly.
your mind goes into some
Yeah.
sort of hypnotic.
But-
I've done that.
But that is, but if you really are doing it in a scientific way, that practice is marvelous. That's really, you're getting a tremendous amount of good out of that. But it's tiring too. I find
is
very
tiring.
often I stop and I say, God, I've got to get out of this. You know?
Yeah, it is.
And I've practiced especially this 2-bar set away and so on and so forth, and somebody will come up and tap me on the shoulder. I think I jump out of my skin. But I was the only person around.
Yeah. No, I found it very mentally taxing, you know.
Yes.
But
I think you know now what you've done superfluous, because this must work. It will work. If it's not working, then you're doing something wrong. I would suggest you get on the phone to me. If any of these things you say, I'll tell you what's happened. I've done this, and this is not what seems to be working. What am I doing wrong? I'll tell you on the phone.
yeah. Well, I thought about doing that, but I was hesitant because number one, I knew I was going to see you today, and
Well, this now we've thrashed it out.
uh-huh.
We've thrashed it all out.
Does this process vary in terms of learning a fugue, for example? Do you do anything differently, or do you?
I learned the Hammerklavier fugue that way. And boy, if you want your neighbors to move away, and yourself, it's of course it's that it's generally from beginning to end. The Hammerklavier fugue. Oh, it's for fugue as well. But again, when fugues, the voices intertwine so much, you know, and so you have to have your beginnings very easy places, even sometimes where maybe the fugue theme doesn't begin. It must be an easy place to begin. But you should find that when you learn the piece.
So, but you do 2 measures at a time in the first initial
Thereabouts.
stages?
Thereabouts. You have to begin around 2 bars at a time, but an easy place. A place that you could grab immediately if you had to.
Yeah, well, that's tricky sometimes in these complicated fugues, you know.
Not if you practice it every day once. It isn't difficult. Where it's difficult to find are places like the last sonatas of Scriabin, to find those places where the measures are 17 eighth notes in one hand and 9 in the other for pages, and you wonder where to begin. Well, you begin you just arbitrarily say, well, this seems to be an easy place, so we'll put a line there. And then you start practicing it there, you'll know it.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
Everything is logic. Make it easy for yourself. This isn't to make it more complicated for yourself. This is tie yourself in a straitjacket. Make it easy. But you'll catch on to it. But you needed this talk to me to separate I mean, you can't do all this at the same time. I mean, you're superhuman if you do. You might later on be able to do more than you are doing now. But I wouldn't try to do more. There's no need to rush into this. You need to learn this thoroughly and easily and prove it to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, if you can't prove it to yourself, it's no good. Remember that. What time?
Well, I think this has been a wonderful session.
Well, I think you've got the idea.